Welcome to Leeway 10 Pod, Series 2. My name is Luke Hereford. I'm an associate artist for Leeway Productions, and alongside some special guests, I will be hosting this series. This series, I will be joined by a new co-host every week, and together we will be discussing the broad landscape of Welsh musical theatre with a series of special guests. But we're keeping it in the family for our first episode. Straight out of Rhondda, today's co-host is Leeway's very own artistic director, Angharad Lee.
Hello, Luke. How are you?
I'm great.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Keeping busy in lockdown number 903.
I am, but I'm sitting in the same seat as we recorded the last podcast. I feel it's really nice to be back here again, chatting with you. And I'm looking forward to listening in because I'm not going to be co-hosting them all. So it'll be lovely just to listen in to these chats.
I think what's so lovely about this second series is that it's very much about putting our guests each episode on the kind of forefront of the conversation, isn't it? So, well, while I've got you, I guess it would be nice to talk about exactly what we want to achieve with this second series.
Yeah, so it came about from a conversation I was involved with a few months back, which Emily, one of our guests today, helped facilitate. So it was the Producers Roundtable event. And I just found it really interesting how the genre of musical theatre, whatever that is, was kind of encapsulated, but with no nod to the Welsh musical theatre scene, because I guess people outside of Wales don't know about it. And then when I posed a question of why nobody outside of Wales takes any Welsh language work, I guess there was no answer because it's rarely considered. So I just wanted to get some conversations going in a warm and safe environment, I guess. So hence this new podcast.
I think it's a really great idea to kind of bring a range of guests into it as well. So I think what's exciting about our lineup is that the artists and the guests that we have very much represent a broad scape of different people who are making musical theatre in Wales, which I guess is a nice little segue moment to introduce our guests for today's episode. Our first guest is Geinor Styles, Artistic Director of Theatr na Nog in Neath, South Wales. The company has been producing theatre for young audiences and their communities since 1984 and making theatre in both the Welsh and English languages. Since becoming Artistic Director for Theatr na Nog in 1998, Geinor has directed over 40 productions, written 15 new plays, including 4 plays with songs, and developed a partnership with Wales Millennium Centre with the musical The Bankrupt Bride, which toured in 2009. This partnership continued with the development of Tom the Musical, the story of the early life of Sir Tom Jones, which toured throughout the UK in 2016. In 2019, she collaborated with songwriter Amy Wadge to create the award-winning show Eye of the Storm, which tells the story of a young carer dreaming of becoming a storm chaser. The show was then performed throughout Wales, the UK, and Hong Kong.
Our second guest today is Emily Gray. She's a theatre director and is executive director of Mercury Musicals Development. Emily began her career directing musicals in the 1990s and in the past 5 years has collaborated on 3 new musicals as the director. Until 2019, she was the artistic director of Trestle Theatre Company and Trestle Art Space. And before that, she was associate director of Unicorn Theatre and Nottingham Playhouse. Emily joined Mercury Musicals Development in 2019 and travelled around the UK listening to over 300 pitches, 41 of which became part of Beam 2020, the UK's largest showcase of new musicals, one of which was Y Tylwyth, a Welsh language production which we will come to in a little while. And I've got a little thing that I discovered, Emily, earlier today. I realised I was doing a bit of research on you, that you directed something called Yarrico a few years ago.
I did, yes.
So I was involved in Inclin Yarrico back in 1999 when it was first produced by the kids.
Wow, on Barbados?
No, not in Barbados, unfortunately. It was the Edinburgh production, which then kind of toured in Covent Garden with Michael McCarthy and Julie Atherton. Such a long time ago.
Oh, how amazing. Wait, and you were performing in that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring it up. It's such a small world, you know, so Hello, welcome.
So we wanted to bring you both on here as guests to talk about Welsh work, specifically musical theatre, and how it can travel and be seen outside of Wales. So to start with, Geinor, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your experience of taking your work with Theatr na Nog outside of Wales.
Yeah, it's been really exciting, I suppose. I'd never thought of it like taking it. I'm really proud of where I come from and sort of my Welsh accent and all those sort of things. So I was like, I think we had a question once during a show. How is this going to translate into other audiences? And I'm thinking, oh my god, it's about Tom Jones. Like, he can actually go anywhere. Like, he's massive in Russia. So I never really felt there was a problem at all. And I felt the same with Eye of the Storm. Very much a Valley's story. But again, you go back to universal things, don't you? I think we worry too much about these issues, and it's what's at the heart of that musical, really, that translates. And I'm not worried at all. We were thinking, do we need to speak, slowly in Ipswich with Tom? Like, I'm like, no, please don't. It would be like we were on Zoom. Do you know what I mean? There'd be like a lag there. So I'm not having any of that. You keep up, like, basically. So no, I've just found it just brilliant that we can take our stories wherever, and people are absolutely lapping it up and lapping up that Welsh charisma, which I've always loved anyway. So yeah.
I think that's a really important attitude to have, because I think we can often, not just in Wales, I think anyone making musical theatre can often get sort of caught up in this idea of making sure something has mass appeal, and sort of getting hung up on this idea of, is it going to appeal to the masses, or is it going to appeal to a broad audience? But I think it's really interesting that you said that just being honest and just sort of being true to what the story is actually kind of does all of that for you.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about authenticity. And I think one of the reviews we had with Tom was not so much Stardust, but Coal Dust. And I'm thinking, yeah, great, good. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. So you know what? I'll take it. I'll take that. Yeah, I think one of the things, that I feel quite strongly about is there was always this thing about what makes a successful musical. What are the ingredients like? And nobody really knows, and I think that frees you up a bit, because actually there is no formula for this. But one of the things that I was told often, I think, with all the musicals that I've done, and I say musicals, I'm using a very loose term there. I think it's more play with songs, is the fact that you need known names in it. People who are either on TV or whatever, to just give it that bit of a bump really in the box office. And that is something I will never ever do. I will never do that. And I know I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but I just can't do that. I suppose it's where I've come from and things. And I think there's such amazing talent in Wales that they need that platform as much as anybody else.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's that pandering, isn't it, to a model that's been kind of imposed onto us, which I'm finding quite challenging at the moment. And, the notion of musical, what is a musical? And is a Welsh musical, whatever that is it, the formula for it, does it look different to the formula that has been imposed on us? And how do we challenge that formula, I guess?
Growing up, especially through the Welsh medium education system, which is all based on the Eisteddfod, so you're constantly, from a very early age, singing or reciting or doing, something, poetry or music driven then. Once you've got that in you, you sort of don't see it as something new. It's in you. It's in your DNA, and you don't see it as anything special. Doing a musical, doing a show which has got words and music in it. It's like, yeah, and so I think we see it quite differently, and I didn't see it as special either. Doing shows with songs in it, I didn't see that as So for me, it's this is new, I suppose, and I think Tom was very much a part of that. All of a sudden I was, having a glimpse of this club that was the musical club. And that was quite strange for me, I think.
I just want to bring Emily into the conversation. because it was a joy to be able to take a tylwyth to you, and it had been chosen for Beam, Emily. It was the first, I believe, the first Welsh language musical to have been selected for Beam. And this was a co-production between Eisteddfod Genedlaethol Cymru and Fidget Feet, aerial dance. I'm just interested in how, as a non-Welsh speaker and someone who isn't Welsh, you kind of found the initial presentation of tylwyth and how you went about to embrace it, because you did embrace it wonderfully.
Absolutely. Well, it was so interesting thinking back to that, and very early on in my time at Mercury Musical Theatre. It's so interesting hearing what you were saying, Geinor, because I've sort of come into this world of musicals going, a musical can be anything, anything, any story that's told through music and song. And I'm really interested in the kind of huge diversity there is. So coming to Wales, to the Royal Welsh College, and having people in Wales come and pitch to us was so fascinating. And when the Tylwyth team came in, it was just beautiful. It was like this breath of Welsh mountain valley air. And I look back at my notes, and what I wrote in very large letters in capitals was authentic. So I think my first impression was, this music is just powerful, beautiful, incredibly Welsh, whatever that means, but that just came across in this this great kind of wave of fabulous musical talent. And then when we watched the scene as non-Welsh speakers, it really didn't matter. I knew what was going on. I could see the relationships. The storytelling was really clear. And for us, it was clearly going to be part of this festival of Beam that celebrates diverse voices from around the UK. I mean, there wasn't an inkling of a doubt. And I think that was about the authenticity, the energy, that sense that this piece of musical theatre, of music theatre, whatever you want to call it, knows what it is. We got a sense of the kind of the traditions, the natural stories, a contemporary feel. It was utterly beguiling, and completely won us over. But I thought what was really interesting, in our day in Wales, we had 12 pitches from different teams, and actually only 2 of those 12 were Welsh stories, Welsh composers, Welsh writers, kind of saying, we've got stories to tell. And to me, that that's a very small percentage, really, 2 out of 12. So I thought that's really interesting to sort of reflect on and perhaps talk more about.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody outside of Wales, why would you think? Why would you think we're in that kind of? I don't even know if it's a predicament. I'm a huge believer of things being artist led, but it's interesting that you brought that into the conversation as an observation. Like, is it a problem? Is it an issue? Is it a challenge? Is it?
Well, I think there's a challenge for us as an organisation to say, we genuinely want to get to and hear those Welsh artists with your stories, and why didn't we manage to gather more people on that day? So I think there's something about us messaging how welcome that is, and how we want to hear more. But I'm really interested in what it is in terms of infrastructure of Wales. Is it about venues, and more venues putting on more Welsh work that we then hear about in England? Is it? I don't know. I don't know what the answers are, but my sense is, where's the work, and how can we access it, and just hear more and enjoy more of the Welsh work that's going on.
Yeah, I'm just wondering then, Geinor, kind of just elaborating on that, because you are a perfect example of somebody who has the confidence to take those Welsh stories, and I know you're creating something really beautiful with Aberystwyth at the moment. So, where does that confidence come from in you, I guess?
God, that's really interesting. I think it's because I'm 52 now. I think, honestly, I only just recently, I think from being mentoring younger people coming through now, that I'm just aware of their lack of confidence in their own voice. And I'm thinking, I'm sure I never had that. So I don't know whether it's the sign of the times, but I don't know where that comes from. I think it's about failing. I think it's about making huge mistakes and looking at your ego when you're in the middle of all of this and sort of standing back and going, well, you could have done that so differently. I think that's where confidence comes from now, is that it's funny, isn't it? You're sort of like driven by this success of being in the West End or having having a Mamma Mia hit and things like that. And they're so rare. And I think, what is that about? What is that? And once you sort of tap into what you see or what you visualize as success, then you can sort of go, do you know what? It's enough to do a show that engages with audiences that perhaps sometimes never ever go to the theatre, only go once a year or whatever because they can only afford it. For them to be moved by something and to want to speak to you at the end, hunting you out in the stalls, going, "Excuse me, did you produce that? Did you direct that?" And well, that was my life up there on that stage. You've just emulated my life for me, and that is just such a humbling experience. And that for me is but it's taken this amount of time to sort of acknowledge that, I suppose. So that, I think it's so hard producing theatre anyway, that anybody who gets the gumption then to get up there and go, right, I'm going to do this story and I'm going to tell this story and I'm going to sell tickets and I'm going to hope that people come and see it and enjoy it. That takes such a lot of nerve, I think. And I think people underestimate that. And I think we're driven by a 5 stars in the Guardian or whatever it may be, and that's such the wrong way of being compelled to do stuff. I think it should be about the storytelling aspect of it first and foremost. But it's sometimes we get sort of drunk on this sort of, oh my god, I've the bloke in the stage, what's his name now anyway? He gave us a terrible review. Do you know what? I was absolutely devastated by the reviews we had for Tom. We sold out the Millennium Centre for a week. It was standing room only, like a small company. That should have been the measure of the success, not the fact that the bloke from the stage didn't like my shows.
I'm really interested in that idea of confidence that you were talking about, Geinor, because that is something that I found coming up through kind of the specifically the Cardiff theatre making scene as a young director. 3 or 4 years ago, I was first starting out. I very much felt like when I was first making work, I was making work that fitted the mold of the kind of the plays that were very in vogue at the time, like your sort of edgy two-handers. And actually, it's only in the last 18 months, probably even less, that I've realized that actually that is not the work that I want to make. I want to be making work that is musical, that is in touch with those roots that I have had for as long as I can remember of music and adoring musical theatre as an art form, and also my personal identity as being a queer theatre maker. Like, I want to bring that into my work now. And it's, when I look back on like my very short career so far, it feels like I've not done either of those yet, because I've just wanted to kind of fit in. But and I certainly feel like what you say about learning from your mistakes is a really important thing, a really crucial thing. And it's I don't know really what the point is I'm trying to make, other than yes, I agree.
Yeah, but I think this is where organisations like MMD are actually really, really useful to an emerging artist like yourself, and the work that Emily and her team are doing there is to support that. To support that, what's grev in English, so that gut feeling, So Emily, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more about those structures that I think are more in place in England than they are in Wales.
Yes, perhaps. I mean, I think what's so important. I absolutely agree with what you've been saying, and particularly Geinor, that whole area of how unhelpful it is to be led by star systems and West End shows. We know, particularly with musicals, it's so unlikely, that kind of level, if that's going to be your success indicator. And what's so important is coming back to the idea, I think, that there's something deeply accessible about musicals, the way we all live with music in our lives. And actually, as an art form, a musical can get to people that many other forms might struggle to. And that's where, so I guess so much of the work we do at MMD is about, take your sights off the West End, it's not helpful. Think about the show you want to write, that you need to make. If it's people starting out, and there are a lot of graduates that come to us and are kind of going, how do I do this thing? How do I get my show on? And of course, it starts from the smallest kernel. And what you said, Luke, absolutely. If you know you want to be making music-led work and queer work, that's brilliant. That's a great starting point. That's you going, this is the world you know that you've got something to say about, your experience that you're going to bring. And that's a really genuine, authentic place to start from. And it's years and years of hard work. I'm in the 50 Club as well, Geinor, and I'm learning all the time, but in the last sort of few years, I've got much greater confidence in going, yes, actually, I kind of know what I think is going to work now. And the more I can support other people, the better. And actually being part of a membership organisation is wonderful. I'm learning from members all the time, but hopefully able to give something back as well, in terms of helping people on that process that, there is no example. There is no, you go from this stage to this stage. And once you've done that, that'll happen. We know that's crazy. It doesn't happen in our world. But what does work, people finding their collaborators, again with musical theatre, such a collaborative art form. And actually, if those egos can be worked with and got over, the fact that you've got a huge collaborative team, that if they're all at their best and you've got a really safe, productive, wonderful, creative working environment, creating a new musical is just the most rewarding thing. It's hard. It's years of working on the craft, working on that team collaborative spirit, working out how you're going to bring music, lyrics, book writing together. But what a satisfying journey when it happens. And I love what Geinor was saying about the Tom musical, about going, thousands of people enjoying this, relating to it, getting that wonderful audience reaction. Yes, that is way more important than the stars and the West End trajectory, way, way more important. And I think one of the things the pandemic has shown us is how important locality is, and how much more, I think, as artists, we're going to be working in our local environments with our local theatres and creating stuff that is authentic to our locality, I hope.
Yeah, I'm glad you just brought that up, because for me personally, as an artist, I've realised in this pandemic that my home hasn't really been my home. It's just kind of a dormitory. It's just somewhere I've been putting my head down, and you realise when something like this happens, God, there's so much about this square mile that I live in that I don't know. You had National Theatre of Wales this year talking about the story of Dr. Price, who was the person responsible for bringing cremation into the world, into the UK anyway, and these kind of stories that of our land, they've been neglected because I think our homes have been dormitories for far too long, because we're always looking outside the self, outside our key areas, So if there's anything positive that's come from this, these conversations feel really rich and exciting.
It's feels like we need to be less afraid to embrace our own culture and to embrace what is honest and what is true and what is specific about our personal selves as artists. I think I always use Derry Girls as an example, which is something that is very, very specific about it's about a very specific time period in a very specific community in a very specific place, but everyone loves it across the globe. And because we can all see the honesty and the truth within it. So do you think that that's something that is starting to change in
COVID and the pandemic is gonna change things, definitely? And it was interesting before COVID happened, we were talking about, I was quite fed up of touring, to be honest, and it was a climate sort of thing that got me going, that we were just trundling around the country, in a van, in a diesel van, and just taking your ways around the country, really. And I was thinking, I was just a bit tired of that. And also that I felt I was neglecting the theatre and the communities on my doorstep. We do an awful lot of work with young people in schools, but beyond that, we were basically trying to get, and I'll be honest with you, trying to get money, because there was more money across the border than there was in Wales, for fees and things like that, especially for musicals. So I was just a little bit disillusioned by that, and so we decided to do co-productions very much with venues on our doorsteps, which basically
Hmm.
very much in the valley communities and things. And I think that is something that we will, in a way, the pandemic sort of helps us with that now. We're able, when we come out of this, our focus will definitely be on our Milltir Square, our square mile. Basically, we're just going to be looking at creating work and nurturing those audiences and giving them something that they really want. So, and I think like Emily was saying about musicals, people absolutely, you can't get away from it. People absolutely love them, and good
Absolutely.
on them. And we should be doing it. We shouldn't be looking. I think there's so much angst around. I think people, it's. I sometimes think perhaps it's easier to write angst than it is to write a musical. So people go for the, this easy to be depressing. And I think that's going to definitely change when we come out of this. And once those venues start opening, people are going to want, it's a little bit like, people saying after the Depression, those musical films, it was their heyday, wasn't it? And I think we could almost see a little bit of that coming back as well, Dairy Girls, the musical. I'd absolutely love to see that. I think things like Our Ladies of Perpetual Succor, like another brilliant, very specific to its area, specific to its era as well. But what a joy that was! What an absolute joy it was. Yeah. So, I think there is, within I think you're right, about going back to our local area and developing those audiences so people actually go back to, we didn't have great audiences for work in theatre in Wales, if we were completely honest with ourselves. Social distancing was almost a business model for us. And so I think we've got to get people back into theatres and back loving theatre, again. And I think musicals could be the answer to
Let's
it.
hope so. Let's hope so. I think that there's quite an interesting comparison possibly with the Scottish scene, just because I'm so aware that there's quite a strong network of new musical theatre writers in tandem with the venues in Scotland, and there are conversations very much about, this is Scottish work, how are we going to take it across the border into England, and I kind of feel like, I'm intrigued as to why that conversation feels further on than it does in Wales. And I expect it's possibly around those venues that are very committed to new musicals, and the people who run them being quite a strong voices in championing it and championing the writers. So I'm kind of interested in how potentially sort of higher education venues, artists, companies in Wales, I don't know, could there be more going on in terms of infrastructure?
When I first started working in theatre, I went to work with a community theatre company called Theatre West Glamorgan, and all their work was devised and it always had music and songs in it. So, and they were just touring up and down the valleys, for something like 16 weeks, one night stands, going around to like rugby clubs, village halls and all this sort of stuff. And they were, in essence, musicals. They were actual musicals, And I think there's a little bit of all of a sudden, when somebody says musical, you've got like, oh, that's expensive. That's going to be really expensive, It's almost like we need to like not say the word musical, but I think we get different connotations. And I think because we get massive musicals come into that centre, like Hairspray and Wicked and all those sort of things, all of a sudden we're seeing dollar signs. And I think we need to almost go back to what, it's, we are the land of song, like, I hate to say it, but that's, we can't stop ourselves, And I think we need to just take the bit of the sheen off it and go back to storytelling with song and just going back to the nuts and bolts of it, really. And I think if venue managers could be willing to invest, really, and it is investment, it is, like we're doing a co-production now with Aberystwyth. Again, it's not a musical, it's a play with songs, but a prog rock musical in that respect, so it's not going to be a seller in that respect, you know what I mean? Unless you've got loads of, people in their 60s and 70s loving all that stuff. But it's an expensive form, but I think we've got to just take the edge off a little bit. It's not that expensive, and I think we just need to like nurture those like you're saying, when even I get a bit nervous, actually, Angharad, when you're saying things like, people like, lyricists, that is it's an absolute incredible skill. But, again, the amount of people that I know who write poetry and, it's in them because of their Welsh language background and their Welsh language education, it's almost as if it's an easy thing for them. So the talent is there. It's just bringing that out, isn't it? It's bringing that out. And how we do that, I think, is a definite skill. I am always led by story and not by song, I must admit. I don't hear it. Somebody tells me a story that I'm thinking, oh my God, that's an amazing story. I just need to put that on stage, and whatever form that will take then, whether it's a musical or whether it's a straight play,
Yeah, definitely. I'm just really interested in what Emily thinks, kind of looking in. And I know what's been lovely since you've been a part of Mercury Musicals is there's been a real reaching out towards Emily. So kind of thank you for that. And there's been a real deep listening as well, which I don't feel has happened with regards to MT in Wales for such a long time. So I'm just wondering what you see looking in. Because I think it's always nice to have that reflective.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because it does feel such a cliche, but I think, from the English perspective, we can't get enough of Welsh singing, and Welsh poetry and Welsh stories. It's such a, in that sense of the confidence, you kind of go, but Wales should be the most confident nation in terms of singing and storytelling, because of all the talent and all the skill and all the tradition. And I think it's so interesting to think about what constitutes a musical, and we have to bust the myth of they have to have 20 people in them and an all singing, dancing chorus and 500 sets. They just don't, and we're seeing that more and more. I mean, so along with the beautiful and quite elaborate, I'd say, Tulworth production, which has a wonderful scale to it, and that's great. The other Welsh piece that was that's been part of Beam is a one-woman show called Go Forth and Slay. That's about a 5th century Welsh dragon slayer, and again, utterly winning, not expensive. One performer with her cello, so at Actor Muso show as well. And you kind of go, I want to see that, and knowing that a piece like that could tour Wales, could tour the UK, could go international. It's absolutely possible. So I think we're just working all the time on going, let's drop the prejudice around big blockbuster musicals and go, what are the stories? I'm absolutely with you on the story has to be the kernel. If there's a great story there's a great idea there, it's so much more likely to work. So I believe in it coming from the story, and then the joy of those artists who kind of make the connection with going, I've had this idea, I've got this story, and I believe the best way to tell it is through song. I can't, there's something about the scope of the story that is not enough as a play. It has to burst into song. It has to musically find its way. And that's a joyful process, and that I hope we do see more and more of.
Picking up on that then, because when I was at that round table meeting, I did ask the question. There were people from ATG there and the Lowry, and I was like, well, how can I convince you to take a Welsh language piece of work? And there was silence. So, where do we find our allies? I'm going to come to you on this, Emily. Where do we, because you are obviously an ally, so I'm going to come to you and kind of go, how do we convince people to take this Welsh language work?
Well, I think, obviously the starting point would have been, and hopefully still will be, a Beam showcase, because at that moment, for an audience of theatre programmers, artistic directors, producers, they need to experience it. They need to be there and to be as blown away as we were in the pitch. But I also think then there's probably that whole element of hand-holding and the kind of offer up of the deeply practical things like the bilingual programme, the subtitles, if that's what's needed. I kind of think in opera probably, and I think in opera and perhaps film, we're very used to foreign language. We kind of, you think of the Parasite, we had cinemas full of people watching a South Korean movie, and having to take on the subtitles and sort of just doing that. So I kind of think we're quite well versed, and perhaps after all this digital work that we've been exposed to as well, we're becoming even better at reading subtitles or surtitles. So I kind of think with anything that's from another language, probably there'll be fear from venues, and again it connects with the confidence of going, we are a bilingual nation, we will bring that to you and we'll help you, we'll work with you to make this happen. And I think what we were very confident about was knowing that there has to be an audience in England, at least. We all know so many Welsh people living in England who I hope, if we got to them in the right way, would flock to see the work. There is not enough of it. So I just think we've got to have these conversations and then have you at Beam and make the conversations happen and work out what it is that's needed for venues, and for people to go, yes, we will find the audience. I'm convinced the audience is there.
Thank you so much for joining us, Geinor Styles and Emily Gray. One last question before we sign off, and it's quite a big one, quite a broad one, but what do you each think is next for musical theatre in Wales?
Well, I hope it's live. I am absolutely, it's really difficult to, like, we did an R&D of Operation Julie, which is a prog rock musical, in the summer last year, and we did that all over Zoom. There was a lot of work for sound designers and an amazing cast, which were actor musos, and it was brilliant. But it's just tantalising that you just want to see it live. You just want to hear that music live. And the quicker we can get these venues open, the better, really, because I think audiences will stream back. We really, and I think that has got to be our focus, really. But I think as well, we've got to be patient. We could rush into something and then it's it may not work. So I think especially with musicals, I think you've just got to give them their proper incubation time with it. So it's but I would want to. I'm sort of fed up with online.
Absolutely. Bring on the live, bring it back, and I'm with you in the kind of hope of the sort of 20s revival of the joy and the optimism that musicals can bring us. I'm wondering, from a sort of MMD point of view, and along with our sister organisation, Musical Theatre Network, I'm thinking that just a very practical step would be, how do we get together a conversation, maybe it's a panel discussion, of higher education, artists, potentially funders, venues in Wales, and have this conversation about where is the Welsh work, what's happening, how can we connect it up, and then how can we get it across the border? How can we get you singing to the world, to the UK first and the world? Because like I've said, we know it's there, and there's beautiful, beautiful work happening. There's stories to be told, there's songs to be sung, there's poems to be turned into lyrics, and we want to get them shared. So let's think about how we keep the conversation going. And I mean, it is tricky at the moment, but perhaps now's the moment where we can get some of the venue representatives and we can find funders who will talk to us, in the hope that when we all open up again, there are connections.
Thanks again for joining us, Geinor Styles and Emily Gray. We want to use this podcast as a platform for the work of Welsh musical theatre artists, so we're going to leave you with a song from Theatr na Nog's production, Eye of the Storm, which was written by Amy Wadge and Geinor Styles. This is Needing Me, performed by Amy Wadge and Lisa Wright.
Maybe windows, maybe doors. But when I'm here, feels like there's no way out at all. And if a world exists, something more than this, I can see it from behind these walls. And maybe I don't know why it is that I can't walk away, and maybe you won't know what I've missed if I don't say. If I took this chance for me to find out who I'm supposed to be, if I didn't have to wait to start my life another day, and if I said I'm done, never look back and just run, would I be free? Could I really live without you needing me? There are no windows, there are no doors, and in this head of mine there is no light at all. So I sit and wait for the pain to fade. I hope you're there to catch me when I fall. And maybe I don't know why it is that I can't let you go. Maybe you won't know what you missed if you don't know. But if I took this chance for me to find out who I'm supposed to be, if I didn't have to wait to start my life another day, and if I said I'm done, never look back and just run, would I be free? Could I really live without you needing me? So we stay just the same, and we won't change the silence in case it breaks. Storms may rage inside us, but we wait and never say, never say. If I took this chance for me to find out who I'm supposed to be, if I didn't have to wait to start my life another day, if I said I'm done, never look back and just run, would I be free? Could I really live without you? Could I really live without you? I don't want to live without you needing me.
Thank you for listening to Leeway 10 Pod Series 2. You can stay up to date on all of our news on Twitter at LeewayProds and by using the hashtag Leeway10Pod. You can also view captioned versions of all of our episodes on our YouTube channel.